In the heart of Sicily, perched atop a gentle rise of land, lies the town of Niscemi. For centuries, it has stood as a quiet sentinel, its ancient streets and sun-drenched piazzas telling stories of generations past. Before the earth gave way, life here moved to a familiar and comforting rhythm. The morning air would fill with the scent of coffee from small cafes and the sound of church bells echoing across the rolling hills. Families lived in homes that had been passed down through their bloodlines, their roots running as deep into the town's history as the olive groves that dotted the surrounding landscape. It was a place defined by its enduring character, a bastion of tradition and community against the hurried pace of the modern world. This was a town where everyone knew their neighbors, where celebrations were shared, and where sorrows were shouldered together. The historic center, with its intricate stonework and narrow winding lanes, was the heart of it all. Children played games in the same squares where their great-grandparents had once played, their laughter a constant, vibrant thread in the town's rich tapestry. The economy, deeply tied to the fertile land, revolved around agriculture, particularly the prized Niscemi artichoke. Life was not always easy, but it was predictable. The greatest threats were thought to be the summer droughts or the occasional economic downturn, not the very ground beneath their feet. The people of Niscemi carried a quiet pride in their home. They were custodians of a legacy, living amidst the echoes of a long and storied history. The town was more than just a collection of buildings. It was a living museum, a repository of memories and cultural identity. From the grand facades of its Baroque churches to the humble doorways of its oldest residences, every stone seemed to hold a piece of the collective soul. This profound sense of place gave life a reassuring stability. The idea that this enduring world could be violently and irrevocably fractured in a matter of hours was simply unimaginable, a concept that belonged to distant lands or ancient history books, not to their own lives. On the eve of the disaster, as January 2026 drew to a close, an ordinary winter evening settled over the town. Lights glowed warmly in windows, families gathered for dinner, and the gentle quiet of the night descended. The land, which had supported them for so long, felt as solid and dependable as ever. No one could have known that this comforting stillness was a fragile illusion. They were unknowingly living on the edge of a precipice, their peaceful existence about to be shattered by the immense and unforgiving power of nature, a power that had been silently gathering strength right beneath their homes. The change began not with a tremor, but with the sky. Cyclone Harry, a storm of unusual ferocity, swept across the Mediterranean and unleashed its fury upon Sicily. For 48 relentless hours, rain fell in blinding torrential sheets. It was a deluge of biblical proportions, far exceeding what the land was prepared to endure. The parched winter ground, accustomed to gentler rains, was quickly overwhelmed. The water did not just run off the hillsides, it seeped deep into the earth, infiltrating every crack and crevice, adding immense weight and pressure to the soil layers that formed the very foundation of Niscemi. This was not merely a storm, it was the trigger for a catastrophe that had been dormant for decades. In the early morning hours of January 25th, the town was torn apart. With a terrifying grinding roar that drowned out the storm, a vast section of the hillside gave way. It was not a slow slide, but a sudden, catastrophic failure. A 4-kilometer-long swathe of land, carrying with it homes, roads, and farms, simply collapsed. It slumped downwards by an astonishing 20 meters, as if a giant hand had scooped out the earth from beneath it. Where there had once been a gentle slope leading away from the town, there was now a sheer, newly formed cliff edge. The familiar landscape was gone, replaced by a scene of raw and shocking devastation. The immediate aftermath was a vision of chaos and disbelief. Houses that had stood for generations were now fractured ruins, some tilted at impossible angles on the brink of the new precipice, others already crumbled into a heap of rubble at the bottom of the slide. Roads ended abruptly in mid-air, their asphalt surfaces twisted and broken, power lines snapped, plunging parts of the town into darkness and cutting off communication. The very geography of Niscemi had been violently rewritten in a single, terrifying event. For the residents awakened by the noise and the shaking, the world they had known just hours before had ceased to exist, replaced by a nightmare landscape of destruction. This was not a distant natural disaster watched on a screen. It was a personal and intimate violation. The earth itself, the most fundamental element of security and stability, had betrayed them. The deep, visceral sound of the land tearing itself apart would become an indelible memory for all who heard it. As the rain continued to fall on the raw wound in the landscape, the scale of the collapse became terrifyingly clear. A significant portion of Niscemi had been lost, and the part that remained was now perched precariously on the edge of a chasm, its future hanging by a thread. The quiet hilltop town was now a disaster zone. In the frantic hours that followed the collapse, a desperate race against time began. With the ground still groaning and shifting, residents whose homes now teetered on the new cliff edge rushed to save what they could. They ignored the immediate danger, driven by the primal need to rescue some fragment of their former lives from the jaws of the abyss. They carried out furniture, photo albums, and cherished heirlooms, their movements frantic, and their faces etched with a mixture of terror and determination. Each rescued object was a small victory against the overwhelming loss, a tangible piece of a life that was literally crumbling away behind them. Firefighters and civil protection crews urged caution, but the pull of a lifetime of memories was too strong to resist. The evacuees' stories are a testament to the suddenness of the trauma. Over 1,500 people were forced to flee with little more than the clothes on their backs. One family described being jolted awake by a violent shake, thinking it was an earthquake, only to look out their window and see their neighbor's garden vanish into the darkness. An elderly man, clutching a small wooden box, spoke of leaving the home his grandfather had built, unsure if he would ever see it again. These were not just stories of lost property, they were stories of severed roots and shattered security. The evacuees found refuge in temporary shelters, schools, and the homes of relatives, their lives thrown into a state of profound uncertainty. The psychological toll has been immense. The initial shock has given way to a pervasive anxiety that gnaws at the community. Displaced families are living in a state of limbo, separated from their homes and their routines. The sight of their own houses hanging precariously over the edge, visible from safer parts of the town, is a constant, painful reminder of their predicament. For many, the trauma is compounded by the feeling of helplessness. They are witnesses to an ongoing disaster, watching as the cracks in the ground creep ever closer, threatening to swallow more of their world. The sense of stability that once defined their lives has been replaced by a gnawing fear of what the next hour or the next rainfall might bring. Even those whose homes were not in the immediate collapse zone are living in a state of high alert. The entire town feels unstable, both physically and emotionally. The disaster has redrawn the map of Niscemi, creating a stark division between the safe and the endangered. This shared vulnerability has brought the community closer in some ways, with neighbors offering support and shelter, but it has also cast a long shadow over their future. The question on everyone's lips is not just about rebuilding, but whether their town, their home, can even be saved. They are a community living quite literally on the precipice, waiting for the earth to decide their fate. The cataclysm at Niscemi was not a random act of nature, but the inevitable result of a perilous combination of geology, weather, and human history. The town is built upon a foundation of weak, unstable layers of clay and sand. Geologists have long known that these clay-rich soils act like a sponge. When dry, they can be relatively stable, but when they become saturated with water, they lose their internal strength and cohesion. The clay transforms into a slick, slippery mass, unable to support the weight of the land and the buildings above it. The intense, prolonged rainfall from Cyclone Harry was the final straw, turning the ground beneath Niscemi into a ticking geological time bomb. The science behind the collapse is, honestly, tragically simple. The immense volume of water from the storm infiltrated the subsoil, dramatically increasing what is known as pore water pressure. This pressure effectively pushed the individual soil particles apart, reducing the friction that held the entire hillside together. The landslide followed an old, pre-existing fault line, a natural zone of weakness within the earth that became the path of least resistance for the collapsing mass. It was a perfect storm of factors, inherently weak geology supersaturated by an extreme weather event. The result was a massive rotational landslide, where a huge block of earth slid downwards along a curved surface. Exacerbating these natural vulnerabilities is the undeniable fingerprint of climate change. While Sicily has always experienced storms, the intensity of events like Cyclone Harry is increasing. Warmer ocean and atmospheric temperatures fuel more powerful and moisture-laden weather systems, leading to extreme rainfall events becoming more frequent and severe. What might have been a manageable storm a few decades ago is now capable of triggering catastrophic failures in vulnerable landscapes. The Niscemi disaster is a stark illustration of how climate change acts as a threat multiplier, turning long-standing geological risks into immediate devastating crises for communities living in harm's way. Tragically, none of this came as a surprise to the scientific community. Geologists had issued warnings for years about the profound instability of the ground on which Niscemi was expanding. Studies had mapped the high-risk zones and cautioned against further development, yet these warnings were largely ignored, lost in a sea of bureaucracy, economic pressures, and a collective unwillingness to confront the inconvenient truth. The disaster was not just foreseeable, it was foreseen. The science was clear, but the will to act upon it was absent, a failure that has now been paid for with the loss of homes, livelihoods, and a community's sense of peace. The tragedy of 2026 is made all the more painful by the fact that Niscemi has been here before. The town's history is punctuated by the groans of an unstable earth. A major landslide struck in 1997, a disaster that should have served as an indelible warning. That event destroyed 50 buildings and displaced 400 people, carving a wound into the town's fabric. It was a clear and unambiguous message from the land itself. This ground is not safe. In the immediate aftermath, there was a flurry of activity and promises. A state of emergency was declared, and plans were drawn up to secure the unstable slopes and prevent a future catastrophe. Following the 1997 disaster, a significant sum of €14.5 million was allocated for comprehensive stabilization and prevention work. The intent was to reinforce the hillside with drainage systems and retaining structures, addressing the root geological weaknesses. However, this crucial project fell victim to a slow-moving plague of bureaucracy, legal disputes, and shifting political priorities. A key contract for the work was inexplicably canceled in 2010. As the years passed, the initial urgency faded. The prevention measures were never fully completed, leaving the town just as vulnerable, if not more so than it had been before. The lessons of 1997 were not learned, they were simply forgotten. This failure to act is a story of systemic negligence. Despite the clear geological risks and the precedent of the 1997 event, the town continued to expand onto the very ground that experts had flagged as treacherous. The warnings from geologists were filed away, and the memory of the previous disaster receded from public consciousness. It is a classic tale of short-term interests winning out over long-term safety. The investigation now opened by the public prosecutor's office in Gela seeks to uncover where the responsibility lies for this catastrophic failure to protect the town's citizens. But for the displaced families, accountability comes too late. The current disaster is not a new problem, but the dramatic and devastating culmination of an old one. It is the direct consequence of decades of ignored warnings and incomplete work. The landslide of 2026 followed the contours of the same geological weaknesses that caused the 1997 event, a grim reminder that nature's memory is far longer than that of human bureaucracy. The echoes of the past are now painfully loud, a chorus of what-ifs and if-onlys. The town is paying the price for a collective amnesia, a failure to heed the clear and present danger that was written into the very land it called home. The immediate danger in Niscemi is far from over. The ground remains terrifyingly active. Satellite imagery and drone surveillance confirm that the Earth is still moving, shifting by several centimeters each day. The landslide is not a singular event that has concluded. It is an ongoing process. New cracks and fissures are appearing, spreading like veins through the saturated soil, creeping ever deeper into the town. This slow, relentless advance is a source of constant terror for the remaining residents. They watch the cracks widen in their streets and walls, tangible evidence that the abyss is still growing, still hungry. The entire community is living in a state of suspended fear, holding its breath with every new tremor and groan from the earth. This ongoing instability has forced experts to make a dire recommendation. Geologists from the University of Catania, including Professor Giovanna Papalardo, have issued an urgent warning. The current red zone, the 150-meter-wide evacuation area, is dangerously insufficient. They insist it must be expanded by at least another 300 meters, pushing the total evacuation zone deep into the town. Such a move would be devastating, displacing thousands more residents and threatening the historic and cultural heart of Niscemi. The town's cherished center, with its ancient churches and squares, now lies directly in the path of the potential expansion of the disaster zone. The government has declared a national emergency, and Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has visited the site, promising swift aid and allocating an initial €100 million for the response. But this is just a fraction of what will be needed, with damage estimates already soaring into the billions. On the ground, rescue crews and civil protection agencies are working around the clock, monitoring the unstable slope with every tool at their disposal. The town's mayor, Massimiliano Conti, has described the situation as dire, a sentiment echoed by Italy's civil protection head, Fabio Siciliano, who confirms the critical and active nature of the landslide. Their efforts are a desperate attempt to stay one step ahead of a disaster that is still unfolding. The greatest fear now is the weather. More rain is forecasted for February, and every dark cloud on the horizon brings a fresh wave of anxiety. Another significant downpour could be the trigger for a second, even more catastrophic collapse. Experts warn that another 10 meters of land could give way at any moment, even without more rain. This constant looming threat has paralyzed the town. The people of Niscemi are not just dealing with the trauma of what they have lost, they are living with the profound and terrifying uncertainty of what they still stand to lose. Their future is being measured in centimeters of shifting earth and millimeters of forecasted rain. In the face of such overwhelming devastation, the spirit of the Niscemi community has become its most vital resource. In the shelters and on the streets, neighbors are supporting neighbors, sharing what little they have and offering comfort in the face of shared trauma. This resilience, born from a deep-seated sense of community, is a powerful force. It is the light that flickers in the darkness of the disaster. There is a desperate hope that this solidarity will translate into a unified call for meaningful, long-term action, not just temporary aid, but a comprehensive plan to secure their future, whether that means rebuilding, reinforcing, or even relocating parts of their historic home. The people demand that this time, the lessons must be learned. The story of Niscemi is a cry for urgent and decisive action. It underscores the critical need for governments to listen to scientific expertise and to invest in disaster prevention, not just post-disaster recovery. The millions of euros that were saved by canceling the stabilization work in 2010 will now be dwarfed by the billions required to address the consequences. Prevention is always less costly than reconstruction, in terms of both money and human suffering. This disaster must serve as a catalyst for a national review of geological risks across Italy, where over 1 million people, according to the ISPRA Institute, live in zones of extreme landslide danger. Ultimately, the plight of this Sicilian town carries a universal lesson that resonates far beyond the Mediterranean. In an era of accelerating climate change, no community is entirely immune to risk. The Niscemi landslide is a microcosm of a global challenge. Around the world, rising sea levels, more intense storms, prolonged droughts, and unstable landscapes are putting unprecedented pressure on human settlements. The failure to prepare, the tendency to ignore scientific warnings, and the prioritization of short-term economics over long-term safety are vulnerabilities that exist everywhere. What happened in Niscemi can happen, and is happening, elsewhere. We must see this tragedy not as a distant, isolated event, but as a stark warning for us all. It compels us to ask difficult questions about where and how we build our communities. It demands that we respect the natural forces we live alongside and prepare for the world as it is becoming, not as it once was. The resilience of the human spirit is a remarkable thing, but it should not be tested by preventable failures. The fate of Niscemi hangs in the balance, a poignant reminder that preparedness is a choice, and that the ground beneath our own feet may not be as solid as we think.